And people were like horrified. It's like, what do you like, like, it's like, why would you say that? You're going to spook people off. I'm like, no, like if people are spooked off by that, like, where's the lie?
Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is a true innovator and thought leader in the world of data and AI. He's one of those unique people who started his career as an engineer. He's technical by nature, but has evolved to be great at go-to-market as well. He's the founder and former CEO of Algorithmia. He founded the company in 2013 and grew it very quickly before it was acquired by Data Robot in 2021. He's keeping himself very busy now. He's an active angel investor. He's on multiple boards. He's advising a number of companies and venture funds and is working on incubating a couple of companies. Please welcome Diego Oppenheimer.
Thanks, David. Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation. Let's jump right into it. First question, what's the one thing that you did, big or small, at Algorithmia that had the biggest impact and you'll do again if you're CEO of another company in the future, which my bet is that you will be?
That's a good one. So I think overall, one of the things that as I reflected over the years that I was really happy that I did was something I called about kind of like aligning incentives on both sides of the game. So especially with like employees and kind of team members as they join, one of the things that I thought was the most important was like, what are they getting out of the experience at working at Algorithmia, and what is Algorithmia getting out of them, of the experience of them working? And so, and I thought it was really important to kind of like take some time to make sure that those things lined up. So everybody talks about kind of culture fit. They talk about kind of like skill set, and these are all very important. But I really, really cared about this like alignment, and the people that I had the best alignment with were the people who stayed the longest at the company. And it was kind of like a big part of how we kind of like grew the culture. We used to, one of the basic kind of values of the company that we always said is like, find the win-win, right? And so like find a win, like, and I've said this multiple times before, probably a lot of people laugh. I say, I think zero-sum games are lazy. If I have to expect you to lose for me to win, that's a lazy way of looking at it. Win-win situations are actually a lot harder to find, but they're much more rewarding. Either be with your customers, either be with your employees, either be with your other team members, your board, your investors. And so a big part of it was like that kind of like always trying to find alignment, but in particular with employees at the company that I thought was like, I would absolutely do that again. And I would be like, just as a pain in the ass. Like everybody used to laugh at me for doing this over and over again. And so I'd do it again and be more a pain in the ass doing that.
I love that value, finding the win-win. I'm not sure that I've heard anyone else with that value before. And I think that it's a really good way of summarizing successful relationships. It doesn't even matter if it's with the employees, with the investors, with the customers, with the partners. I love that. Let's go a little bit deeper on this, specifically as it relates to the employees and hiring. How did you actually do that? I mean, tactically, how did you actually figure out if there was the win-win?
Yeah. So, I was probably the last interview on, for everybody that started the company, kind of like
every person,
probably, I think like at peak, we were about 100 people, maybe a little bit over 100 in the company. But that means that like, 200 people went through the company over its history, maybe a little bit more. And I thought it was really important, first of all, that like they met the CEO and they knew like where, and everybody kept on telling me, hey, once you hit this mark, you can't do this. Once you hit this mark, you're not going to be able to do this. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be a blocker, but I do think it's really important that I get to meet everybody. And I asked the same interview question for years and years and years and years. And I said, at this point that they, especially in the end, when people got to me, the decision was kind of already made, right? Like, I trusted that my team, that they have vetted the technical skills and the kind of like EQ and the kind of like value alignment with the company. And really what I want to do is that final, like, will I be able at this company to provide what this person wants? And will this person be able to kind of like, meet that on the other side with the company? And so I always told people the same thing, which is that you say, hey, we're having this conversation. You start tomorrow. I'd be like, David, you start tomorrow. Now 2 years have gone by. Look back. Why is David a better person? What happened at Algorithmia that like made you, for your career, for your development? Like, why are you a better position than you are right now today? And some people, kind of gave me the BS answer of like, oh, I just want to make the company successful, blah, blah. And like, that was a bullshit answer because it's like, no, this is about you. This is not about the company, right? I want to understand why you're going to be better, right? And because if we can't provide that, then this is not a good fit. We're not aligned, right? But if we can't provide that, this is going to be a really successful thing because I know what I need from you, right? I needed you to be a great engineer or a great marketer or work really hard in like FinOps, like whatever it was. Like I already knew what we needed from you, but now I needed to learn what you were expecting out of this interaction. And like 2 years in a startup is a lifetime. And the most valuable thing we have is time. And so like if we weren't going to be able to provide the environment for you to grow and fulfill your own things, then this is a terribly aligned relationship, even from day one. So that was kind of like how I did that in my interview process.
I heard Mark Benioff speak one time, and he talked about this concept of an employee value proposition, which I had never really heard before. And it has stuck with me because it's kind of what you're saying, right? It's like, this is what we are saying to you as the employee of what you can expect. And if that doesn't match to what you want, then don't come here, basically. I like that. Do you think that people earlier in the interview process on your team knew how to ask those kinds of questions, or was it really left to you at the end of the process to do that?
I think people, everybody had their own style, and I tried not to like meddle too much. And look, there's people who like, as a company grows, I'm sure this happened to you. Like there's people who've never hired before. Right. And so you definitely have to do training and you definitely have to kind of like indicate. And then, as the company got bigger and, we had more structure around, hey, you, Peter, are going to do the, kind of technical interview, and then like kind of like Mary, you're going to do like, cultural fit and like blah, blah, blah. And so like that was a little bit more structured, but everybody knew what I was going to ask because it was so repetitive and I always asked the same question. And then they're also horrified, especially my HR team, when, because I would also ask and be like, hey, I just want you to know, like, I want, we're going to have a social contract right now, right? Once I've done the alignment, this is not something only the CEO could do, which is,
You're right.
we're going to agree that you're always going to look out for David, right? And the best interests of David, right? Obviously, we're all going to be honest and legal and all, but you're always going to be, and I'm always going to look out for the best interest of my company. And this is our social contract. So there's never going to be disappointment. I'm always going to make a decision that's best for the company. And you should always make a decision that's best for you. And we can still find alignment. Right. And people were like horrified because like, what do you like, like, it's like, why would you say that? You're going to spook people off. I'm like, no, like if people are spooked off by that, like, where's the lie? Like I will 100% every single time make the best decision for the company.
So in terms of prioritization, when you were hiring, you and I ran this session for some CEOs, a couple of weeks ago, and some founders, and there were a number of people talking about, wanting to find that top 1%, the top 1% engineer, the top 1% person to add. If I understand what you're saying to me, yes, you wanted great people, but you would actually, if I offered it to you, you would prioritize the person who was that win-win fit over trying to find the most talented engineer.
Yeah, every time. I mean, I think like the value alignment, like obviously like there's a minimum skill set required, not even minimum, like there's a skill set that you want. And like, there's the great, everybody talks about the 10X engineer. We definitely had 10X engineers, but I had 10X engineers, but like were the best ones were not only like a power themselves, but they actually powered everybody around them. Right. And so like my definition of a 10x engineer was,
Mm,
you know, I got spoiled. The
mm,
reality is I got spoiled. My co-founder, who's also been like one of my best friends for a very long time, was one of those like, you know, 10x, 15, whatever, like just absolute cracked person, like developer, and like could just, you know, so I knew what good looked like. Right. And it allowed me to kind of like understand that like, hey, that plus people who know how to play in that team environment, the people who kind of like, you know, can align themselves with like, you know, the people around them will actually boost everybody up. And
mm,
so that boost, right, is actually just as powerful as what one individual could do. So then if I'm looking at it and say, okay, I mean, just to, you know, to play around with numbers, oh, this is an 8x engineer, whatever that means. Right.
mm,
But they are like 8xing their people around them versus like the 10x that just 10x's themselves or whatever you want to call it. Like, I'll take the 8x all day.
mm,
Right. And
mm.
so because it's because like there's a power in these, as especially as organizations grow. You know, you've run really large
Yeah,
organizations
yeah.
where like that ripple effect that people have around them is so much more powerful than what one individual can do.
Mm,
And so that alignment to me was insanely important. Like I wanted to see that.
mm,
And, you know, everybody's obsessed with the best of, right? The best of, the best of. It's like, well, first of all, like a lot of this stuff is like best on what? Well, what's the metric? What's the
mm,
KPI? Like lines of code,
mm,
like, you know, deliverable, like, you know, solves hard problems. I mean, sure, these are all can be metrics, right? But how about like lifts the organization? Right? Like
mm,
legitimately powers, you know, um, I'm a little bit like biased in this. Like I've played rugby my whole life. And it's interesting because it's really hard to have like a star on a pitch, like on a rugby pitch. There's like 15 players and they're all kind of like just as relevant as any other.
mm.
And like, it's not like in football, you have like, oh, there's a captain with like the quarterback and the ball,
Yeah.
like, and like, there's just, you don't hear about it that much. Of course, you have like star players, but it's like impossible to win without the entire team coordinating. And like, you know, especially on like you're saying on defense, like you got to trust the person to your left, you got to trust the person to your right because you can only cover this amount.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so I've just always thought that that team play and that like kind of like way to work with each other and understand that you're on a mission together was way more important than individual talent. Individual talent's important, don't get me wrong. But like that alignment was like just as important.
I think the lesson that you're saying, which I do think the way you put it is great. It's like you could be the 10x person. It doesn't mean that you're the 10x on your own productivity. It's when you can 10x the team. As you're saying that, what's going through my mind is all those people that I've worked with that are the 10x. There are very few of them. I would actually, and much fewer of the 10x that can 10x the team than the 10x individual contributor. You have the sales rep who's like the best rep by 10x, but when they become manager, they don't have that same ability. And I actually think my lesson, as you're saying this, is like I probably didn't spend enough time, money, energy, resources to make sure that those 10x people on the team 10x, like that I did everything in my power to keep those people. Like those are the people that it's almost worth any amount of money, right? It's almost worth any amount of money, time, title. It's like those people are, they can really change the trajectory of a company. You know, even a company of 1,000 people, you get two, three, four of those, they can change that trajectory.
Yeah. And it's and like the thing is, so first of all, 100% agree. And it's also like the rubric, it matters here, right? Because I just saw, you know, people that were just so much better, you know, like so let's take the sales rep. Like I had a sales rep who um never hit the top numbers. Like never hit the top numbers. Like he wasn't like he was never the best at like selling, right? But he was absolutely the best at like talking to marketing and giving the feedback that was necessary from the field and talking to the engineering team and learning what was going on like with the product and building it out. And like we probably, you know, literally from like the conversations and his interest in like what we were doing, right? Like he legitimately was like making the entire company better. And like he was still selling. I'm not, don't get me wrong, like, you know, made his quarters, like, you know, like I'm not like, it's not an excuse to like not make your number. No, like, he's just not the top. Right. And like he didn't have the sales, but I could just look at the ripple effect of like what this person was doing in terms of like, you know, I mean, I saw this, like engineers wanted to talk to him. Like, when does the engineers ever want to talk to the sales team? Like, they're usually running away. They're like, oh yeah, tell us more. What is the customer saying? Like, why do they not like this? Like, we created this feature. Why is this problem with this? And like, there was such a dedication to like really understanding the problem and caring and stuff like that. And guess what? When stuff like went really bad with an account, guess who jumped on the engineers immediately, right? Yeah, we'll go help out blah. Like, we'll definitely go help him out. Like, are you kidding me? Like, so like it just creates this environment of like incentive alignment where like you just get so much more. And so this is where I have a personal reaction to this. Like, I only hire top 1%. Top 1% of what? Like, what's the rubric?
One of the things I said in the intro, and when I met you, we just recently met, and we were talking about stuff, and I thought you actually came from a go-to-market background, not from an engineering background. And so maybe let's as we start transitioning to go-to-market, the question I've been asking guests recently, because a lot of people have been asking me to ask it, is where did you get your first 5 customers? Like, how did you find the first 5 customers?
Oof. The first 5 customers, let's see. So we had like a little bit of kind of like a split history in terms of like we started out as a very developer focused product. And so it was kind of like a PLG motion. We found developers. It was all done via content. We put out blog posts and examples and tools. And so like it was very like leading towards a developer audience that wanted to learn how to use machine learning inside building their apps. Over the course of history of the company, we ended up, moving same product, but much more focused on an enterprise. So kind of like, I'll give you the story of the first 5 customers on both sides. Very, very different,
Great.
very, very different ACVs. Like the first 5 customers on the kind of developer side were like purely via content. We realized early that like the people like us, me and my co-founder, like lived in Hacker News, and that like, getting a cool post on Hacker News was what people were going to read, and they got started and they would want to use these products. And so we just spent a lot of time creating great content, some things that like look forward, that were, could be controversial, that would like spark a discussion, and high quality, and then show how to use the product, which is, right now, like 3,000 guides of how to do that. Like every single developer product you see on earth, like focuses on content, because that's why, developers don't want to be sold to. They want to read, they want to understand, they want to build, they want to play. And that's how you get them. And so we onboarded like our first course directly through content, sign up here.
And just to be clear, this is content you and your co-founder wrote.
Correct.
Yourselves.
Yeah. We were writing like, we knew on day one that we were going to like live and die, based on the demos we built. Right. And so we went and built cool demos, and, that was it. And now I work with my co-founder on his company. He's a CEO now. And I'm helping him out. And it's like, we joke around, we say, we call it GIF driven development, right? Which is, as we develop things for the build, we actually publish GIFs. And we show, hey, this is the product working here. This is the product working here, because that's what developers want to see, right? They want to see the product in action. And so we didn't invent the term, by the way, but like, I love it. It's a GIF driven development. Is just like snippets of what you're doing and showing it out all the time. On the enterprise side, I didn't know anything. Okay. Like my background, I came from Microsoft, but I was like deep in the engineering org, right? So I had no exposure to like real selling while I was at Microsoft. But, I had been building enterprise products for a long time while I was there. I would argue I knew nothing about enterprise sales when I started, like absolutely nothing. And I kind of brute forced my way into it. The first customer we ever got, we closed, which was Merck, which is kind of a big customer, right?
First,
so like,
yeah.
Was an intro via VC. One of our VCs made an intro, and they're like, hey, one of these kind of like CIO like things, hey, like, this is actually even before we had transitioned into a pure, mostly enterprise company. And we just got a believer, right? And the head of this research group that had a problem, and we understood the problem, and we understood how to solve the problem. And I think he just saw in us as like, these guys are going to go and live and die on this mountain, like helping me out, and I have to solve this problem, and I haven't found anything, and this is interesting, and I'm going to give them a shot. And we'll be
Mm.
thankful for that shot forever, right, in history, because it kind of kicked off, once you get one and you kind of generally understand what it takes, you can get the second one. The second customer, which was Nike, we were taking down some engine was actually, again, like we got a champion inside a team that thought our tech was just really cool. He's just like, he was,
How did you get the intro? How did you get the intro to him?
it was Kenny and I were at a booth. We manned a booth at like a random like AI conference, and they came up to us and they were like, he was at first skeptical, and then started, trying to like see like, if like very typical in the like engineering world, where it's like, let me see if I can like make them trip up. And, and so he was just kind of like trying to see where he would trip up. And then, did tell that like my co-founder Kenny wasn't tripping up, and he wasn't tripping up, and he wasn't tripping up. And he's like, okay, I kind of want to try this then. And he's like, okay. And so like we started that conversation, and like later on that turned into like, beyond that.
Was that the first conference you ever went to?
That was the first. Yeah. Well, so we started going to like conferences pretty early in our history. A lot of them were like, my co-founder came from an academic background. I had been in an industry, and so, what we knew as a conference was like, he knew about poster sessions, and I knew about these like mega Microsoft conferences, right? And it's like the middle was like an unexplored ground for us. But we were just like, we would just travel, and we would just be there, right? And like the attitude that we had was, you can't win a game if you're not on the field, and so we're going to be on the field. And it doesn't matter that like, you're engineer or not, like you're out there and trying to get this, like, the software, you're always evangelizing. And, I used to travel to all these conferences with a small booth or whatever I could get for free, because we had very little money at that point. And like, honestly, I remember it fondly because I had, these oyster, like, it goes like the big, like the what are called, the cases, they're unbreakable cases. Are they called oyster
Oh
cases?
yeah.
I had a suitcase, sized one, and I had a monitor and a laptop in there, which had our like system as a demo. And I literally traveled with that thing, like, I don't know how many thousands of miles across like the US, like in the first couple of days. And it was awesome. But yeah, I think like the first couple of enterprise sales were just like, you got to be on the field. Like, you're not going to do it from home.
And as you scaled the business, in a lot of ways, you became the face of the company, and that you really were a big driver. I mean, it sounds like even for a while, in terms of being a big part of the sales motion. Can you maybe talk about how you scaled yourself, over time, as you actually hired a sales team and all that? How were you involved where did you play in the process?
Yeah. So I was lucky that, so in the beginning, I thought I had to do everything, and that's always the wrong answer. Especially like if you're hiring right, then it's 100% the wrong answer. And if you are doing everything as a founder, then you might need to relook at your hiring practices, right? To go figure that out. I think like from my perspective, the most important thing was two. One, which is understanding that you're the CEO of a company in a pretty new space. In this case, like, AI was, it still is, but, fairly new. We're talking about, 2013, 2014, 15, 16, right? Like, pretty innovative area where, I knew quite a bit about, right? I had been in the space. I was in the trenches every day. And so being able, like, people wanted to talk to me. Right. And like, that's a good thing, right? Because if nobody wanted to talk to me, like, it would have been a lot harder, right, to open doors. So once we understood that people wanted to talk to me or wanted to listen to what I had to say, or at least the perspective of what I was seeing in the market, we could use that to open doors. Right. And eventually, I'm fast forwarding a lot.
Yeah.
My last CRO before we sold the company, who I learned a ton from, was like, hey, we need you to like open a deal, and we need you to close the deal. We'll do everything in the middle. Right. But people want to talk to the CEO. They want to see that you're still involved. They want to see that you are willing to go talk to the customers and sit down and hear their problems and share your perspective of the world. And like, there's a level of, you know, no matter how humble you are, like there's a level of admiration that people are going to have for a CEO in a space that they care about. And so like, let's use that. Right. And like, and kind of think about what are the things that you can write. And, you know, I did a ton of content and I had my marketing team help me generate this content, but it was always under, like, most of it was under my name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was about like, there's a persona that you're building because ultimately business, I don't care how deep your software is, like it's still humans, right? And go back to that alignment thing, which is like, how do we get, you know, you're going to trust me with your company's business and you're going to trust that I'm going to work my ass off to like make you, you know, my software work for you, bring the value and all that stuff. That relationship needs to be kind of like created. So like showing up as a CEO matters, right? Even as you scale. And I mean, I turn around the question on you, like you've scaled many businesses, like it kind of goes
Yeah,
forever, right? I mean, like that interaction of like using your, you
100%.
know, like, you know, no matter how big the company is, like it always matters.
It always matters. My biggest surprise was how much people would want to meet with me because I would always like, who am I? You know, why does it matter? And I had someone say something to me one time, one customer who at the end of the call, they said, Dave, I just want to say thank you for doing this call with us. We work with a lot of vendors and I can't think of the last founder that got on a call with me to ask my feedback. They send their sales team, they send this, and that was a moment that clicked for me of, I think the way you're describing is the right thing is like, I'm the person building this product, dedicating my life, everything, the company to make this product work for them. And actually showing up and asking them like to talk to me and that makes them feel special, that makes them feel heard, that makes them feel part of the company. So yeah, actually I would say the more time that went on, I actually got more and more time to do that because it's hard. It's, you know, at 100 employees, at 200 it's kind of hard. um and it can be so impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, you know, it's a cliche. Everybody's says be customer obsessed. Be customer obsessed, but it literally, you have to be customer obsessed. Like I don't see a world where this works, where you know, like you have that like obsession. I remember even like, so we did like free lunches on Wednesdays, right? At the office.
Mm.
And like, I had a little sign on the lunch table that says, remember who pays for lunch, right? And it's the customers. Right? At some point, it was the VCs as well, but like that's not
Right.
important. Like you know, but like it was like I think like the message was the important thing is like we have to be like, and I'm not saying the customer's always right or anything like that, but we got to understand that like we are a company, we are a
We
business,
exist for
we
we
exist
exist
for
for the
one purpose
yes.
only, and that is, you know, to serve our customers and to like, you know,
Yes.
fulfill whatever they need. That's it. Like there's no other, like, you know, like all the other purposes can be true, but they're secondary.
Can you give me a tactical way that you like a campaign or initiative that used you
Yeah.
as the centerpiece?
Yeah, so I think like, and I think actually, our friends over at Workbench were the ones that, you know, taught me this, which is, the use of, roundtables and bringing in people into roundtables and not selling them anything. And so I think this is probably one of the most successful things that we did over the history was just we could get, you know, I would do a 9-person roundtable, right? I would be like insanely strict, no salespeople, just me, no marketing, nobody. You know, the team wanted to like, the team didn't really like this,
Mhm.
but you know, quiet place, actual
In person.
roundtable, yeah,
In
in
person.
person, actual 9 roundtable, like an actual roundtable. I was important, and I would pick a subject, and I would invite the top executives that I could get to that meeting. And so, for example, like if there was a conference, about, you know, of a pharma conference, I would go and try to get like the head of machine learning at Merck, the head of machine learning at Pfizer, the head of machine learning at AstraZeneca, and I would invite them, and I'd say, hey, Chatham House rules. Nobody's recording his. There's no notes. There's no sales. There's no marketing. I promise I won't pitch you absolutely anything. we're going to talk about what machine learning problems pharma is facing right now.
Mm.
And and by the way, I ended up doing some of these in Zoom during the pandemic, and it did work as well. I prefer them in person, but I did do them during the pandemic in Zoom. And I just became this moderator of getting. So first of all, I was shocked at the fact that I got like competitive, like people. I did a
In the
finance
same
one.
room, in the
Yeah,
same
in the
room.
same table. Like I did a finance one, and I had JPMC and Bank of America and Citi, and they were all and they were the heads. And like at first, people were a little bit shy, but then you start. I was the moderator. I started probing them. It's like, oh, you're not revealing secrets. First of all, nobody's talking about it. What are the problems here? Hiring. How are we going to get this? We can't get models in production. We can't do this. We can't do that. And they were amazing. Like it was like some of the coolest like conversations I had in history. And then I made them very like exclusive in the sense that like if you were a good participant, I'd invite you again. And if you were not a good participant, I'd probably like try to get somebody else. And people were like begging me to get in, right? Like these executives were calling me like, "Hey, when are you doing your next one of this? That was the best roundtable that I've ever been a part of. Like, how do I get into this?" And I'm like, "Hey, it's like 9 people only. Like, you're gonna have to wait till the next one, blah, blah." And that just created this thing where like that was by far probably one of the best things. And the reality is with those executives, I still talk, I've sold a company 3 years ago. I still talk to them. I still catch up with them. I catch up with them in cities. Like they've moved around between like same industry, but like different companies. So like you can keep on, when these people, you take the time to listen to their problems, what they need, and you're trying to shove your toy down, your software down their throat, you will learn a lot. And so that was kind of probably like the biggest lesson I learned in the go-to-market world, which is like just shut up and listen for a while, and then create environments where people want to talk. People want to talk about what they do. Everybody does.
And it's back to the win-win right there in that roundtable. They're learning, they're advancing their career. It all ties back to that. One of the things you had crazy customers from early on. If you look back at that time, would you have gone day one for such, the Mercs and the Nikes? Like, because I I have had a hard time with those size customers, and a lot of companies I work with have a hard time with those size customers because they're used to dictating everything, and could hijack the company. So how did you do that on purpose? I guess is question one, and two, how did you deal with that?
Absolutely did not do it on purpose. Like absolutely not. Like I, not planned at all. Like that would just be like a lie if I said that like I was like, oh yeah, I like targeted this company and went to them and like nah, just not true. Um, they were there and they had the problem that we were solving. And again, it came down to like where the places where we found the champions that wanted to take a bet on a company like ours. And looking back, this is a point of debate that I have incessantly with my ex co-founder on this. And it's like, should we have done this company or not? Like there's some companies that like one could argue like threw us off, right? And like,
Hmm.
and there's like pivotal moments of like, hey, what would have been different if we hadn't done this or we hadn't wasted time on this, right? Because that's ultimately like the biggest problem you have with going after these large customers is opportunity cost. Like that's really what you're managing. But everything's a butterfly effect, right? Like the fact that I had the Mercs and the Nikes got me the next two, right? The fact that I had like, these others is the way. And so I keep on going back and forth. Like, yes, there was moments where by the end of the journey, I was a lot stricter and I had a lot more backbone to push back on these
Mm-hmm.
customers, right? And so like the situation was a lot better, but you know, I can't say I wouldn't go back and do the same companies again because like maybe we wouldn't have had a company at that point. Maybe we would have never had an exit. Like we wouldn't exist. And so it's kind of hard to like scalpel your way through like a point in time and be like, oh, we would just change this and everything would have been perfect, right? It's just not true. I think we got a lot better at holding um, the other side accountable, and we got a lot less. It's really, really, really scary to fire a customer. Like, and like sometimes I'm sure you had to do it,
Yes.
right?
The
Right. And like,
worst experience.
right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, you go, like, how dare we, right? Like, we're trying to build something from scratch, like up, and like, we have the gall to like say no to a customer. Like, who do you think you are? Right. And like, that's how I thought. Right. But no, you have to develop that backbone. You have to understand the fit, where where your ICP matters and like how to build around that because, um, it's a really difficult thing to do. And it's probably like, again, I go back and forth. I think one thing that I can say I probably want to, I'll give you a good example. Like, I think our third largest customer in the big, like, so I gave you two. I'm not going to mention what let's say the third one was a government agency.
Yeah. Everyone will know who they are. Yes.
Right? Your third enterprise customer should never be a government agency unless you are an absolute government expert. And I was not, and I am still not today. Uh, and but after going through a nightmare there, like legit nightmare, would we have ever gotten the JP Morgans? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. Probably not. Right. And so like that's kind of there's this butterfly effect around that I don't really know how to dissect. I know that like individually it could be like that was a bad idea and that was a bad idea and it cost us a lot of pain and there's a lot of opportunity cost. And if I went backwards, I'd know how to contain it, I think.
Mhm.
Right. I know and so I feel a little bit more confident. So I probably would have done the same decision making, but with a lot more understanding of what I was getting into. And because of
Mm.
that, I think I would have been able to contain how much opportunity cost we took on because of doing
Mm.
it. So a little bit of a non-answer. Hopefully
Uh,
that's
no. That's a good.
changed.
No. That's that. I think that's for me. I think that it's this challenge of if you can land the big fish, then what do you do with it? But if you can land it and be successful as referenceable customers, no one can say like, oh, you can't handle my size account. You can't. What's your security look like? You're like, I'm working with people who care more about security than you ever will. So like, um, so let me ask another question. You raised money from a number of investors. Um, as you think about that, was there something that though like where was the value that your investors brought, if any, to the business?
Yeah, so I think different stages, so we raised, kind of traditional path of did a pre-seed, seed, series A, series B, and then we got acquired right before our series C. And we're like halfway, we were like out raising our series C. I think investors, there was plenty, there was insanely good investors. People like like our seed investor, which is Madrona, Tim Porter. I can call him out directly, like was like with us the entire time and always trying to be, I always say like, his best quality is he knows what he knows and he knows what he doesn't know. And he
Mm.
kind of stays out of what he doesn't know and just tries to be helpful in that case. And like was just completely supportive throughout the entire, history of of the company. In other cases, we had investors that came in and gave us like great leads, right? And because they had like, a CIO summit and like they were really well connected. And, if you have to learn what the quality of each investor is and what they bring to the table. And in some cases, you just have to understand that all an investor does is bring cash.
Mm.
And cash is green and they're irrelevant. And it's okay. Right? Just don't, again, that goes back to like, the social contract of like expectation management. Like if I bring in this investor and I think they're going to bring all this value and they don't, our social contract has been broken, right? But if
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think all you're doing is bringing cash to the table, which is fine, I need cash,
right,
right? And
right.
that's all I expect. Then, no harm, no foul. And so I just don't really think it's just like, I think it's really important, very, very important to pick your board members well. And I think your board members, a good board member, there's essentially three categories of board members in my mind. There's like the great, right? Which like increase the value of the company, really coach the CEO and really help out. And sadly, like I think like that's like 1% of board members. like maybe a
Hmm.
little bit more, right? And they're insanely rare. I hope that one day I can become that board member. I'm in a bunch of boards. I hope one day I can become that board member. Like I really do. I think like the biggest category is the like, hey, they're like sort of helpful, but kind of like, like no harm. No harm is done.
Hmm.
Like, help you think through things, help you do that, and like and they're there. And then there's like a category of board members which are actively detrimental to your company. Uh, and probably every CEO who's been around long enough has had at least the bottom two categories, the like no op and the bad. The great is a lot, they're a lot less common. Um, you just got to avoid that bottom, that bottom because they can be so disruptive to the company, they can be so problematic, they can be so dysfunctional to a board, and it really matters to cross references and be like understand what you're getting into, right? Because it's the one position you can't really remove, or it's very very difficult to remove.
Hmm. When so you ultimately sold the company in 21. Was that, you mentioned you were fundraising during that process? Was that you were starting a fundraise process and out of the blue came an acquisition offer, or was that something that was being nurtured? Was there a partnership there? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I had, every single time I'd gone into a raise, ever since, like, our seed round, I tried doing a market check on, like, what our value was,
Mm,
our exit value was, right? And so I actually ran, like, company sales cycles, not quite as much as a sales cycle, but at every round, like, which was, like, talking to the teams, trying to figure out, understanding where we were. It was an insane amount of work and kinda crazy, but I kind of like, I think, like, my co-founder and I were always like, "Look, we should always know, you know, what better way to understand, like, if we should move." Every time you take money, you move the goalposts, right? And in some cases, you move the goalpost by a lot, right? And so we always thought, "Hey, we should better understand, like, we should understand, like, where we are today, what the value is, and what the other side of the market sees, because like should we be moving these goalposts so much, like we believed in the business, we believed in what we were doing. Some people would suggest, I see this online a lot, it's like never even think about a sale because you're mentally not prepared and you're not going for the moon. Like this is business, right? Like we're doing, like you're supposed to be doing risk reward calculations on a daily basis all day, right? And
yeah,
so this
yeah.
was just another risk rewards, like like calculation. And so, to go to that thing, like we had always run sales processes. We were kind of like, in this particular case, we had been talking to a couple of our current customers who are going to invest in the company. And this is very specific to the company we ended up getting acquired by, which is, um, what we saw from a go-to-market perspective is, in AutoML, which is like what Data Robot did, who's bought us, they produced a lot of models because it's a tool that literally produces a bunch of machine learning models. But they were having a really hard time putting those models into production. They're kind of like and we, I noticed that like anybody who used their product, we could sell to, right? And we would to be like, "Hey, I know you're doing all this, and you have a bunch of these models." I used to call it the models in a drawer problem. You have all these models in a drawer. You're not putting them in production. We put models in production. Why don't you buy us? And they had a competing product to ours, but it was like smaller, not as figured out, and stuff like that. And we were like, so we just started chasing those customers, and we started chasing them, just from a go-to-market perspective. And I guess what happened internally, this is the story I was told by, it was like one of their VPs over there was like, we keep being beat by this like little ass company, like in all these deals for like the infrastructure of how to run our shit. Like we should go like buy them or
Wow.
figure that out. And so we got an inbound for the acquisition for the acquisition that was like brokered by one of our VCs. And it was interesting because essentially at that point I essentially, I'm fast forwarding through a lot of like the typical
Yeah.
flamenco dance between the two parties of like, I like you, I don't like you, like are we going to talk, are we going to play together? But like the fast forward is essentially like I told the CEO, uh, I was like, look, I'm in the middle of a race, like I can't pay attention to this because you'll like screw my raise. if you want to go do this, like we got to go fast. And we actually did the entire acquisition in 45 days clock time. 100, I'm sorry, not everybody, 85 people went over.
Wow.
So like it wasn't like it was like, I mean, you've done a couple of M&As, so you know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean.
yeah, yeah.
Every lawyers on both sides called us, the CEOs, absolutely insane. And they like were like, there's no way, there's no way. And like we just made a deal that like this was the time frame because anything else wouldn't work. And so, it was probably like the worst 45 days of my life. I mean, emotionally and like just exhaustion and like just the amount of hours that I had to put into this. But and run the company and not tell anybody except my leadership
Right.
team. And just be a zombie in general. And but yeah, we from interest, from LOI to close, it was 45 days. And that we kind of like sold the company.
And were you running the Series C process in parallel to that, or you had in
Yeah, yeah. So we had essentially, I mean, like the reality of it was like this is 2021, right? Like you had to be growing at 300%, year over year, which is like a fantasy at this point. Nobody does that, right? Like at that stage, we were under that, but like we were still growing like a decent amount, above 100% growth year over year. But we were like kind of like, and so the decision here was like, okay, we were going to raise this, we're confident we were going to raise the Series C, but it wasn't going to be the like 3x multiple on our previous valuation, which is like the typical, like, I don't know, typical. It's like, that kind of metric that you kind of look
yeah.
at. It's like, hey, double, triple, 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 double, double IPO kind of like general metric on how you look at things. And, we weren't going to triple, we barely were going to get to a double on valuation, but we did have like our biggest customers writing us the largest checks, which was like a very big show of confidence in what we were doing, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, halfway through that Series C, and then at that point, understanding that like where we were going to move the dilution, where we were going to move the goalpost to. We've been doing this for a number of years already. Uh, there was, the outcome was going to be significant for a bunch of team members,
Right.
and like, that was ultimately kind of what drove us to sell the company.
Wow. What is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at the or what was the biggest challenge you ever
Yeah. So
faced at the
I
company?
think like, I tell people, the entrepreneurial lifestyle is sinusoidal, right? Which is, so like you get these like ups and downs, and, sometimes the worst day of your life and the best day of your life are the same day, just like different hours. And that roller coaster was probably the hardest, right? So like in general, like, you know, uh, I'm a pretty like highly wired person, and so like I have a lot of energy, and I like to like and like just the emotional roller coaster and managing the emotional roller coaster for home, for the team, for investors, for customers, and like, you going to the team and being like, hey, it's all good, everything's got, and then like, picking up the phone and calling my co-founder, being like, we're fucked. Like, how are we gonna get out of this? Like, like that was probably the hardest part, just kind of like managing the, like the thing, because, and I know you've seen this all the time. Like there's a near death experience every other week, like
Mhm.
in running a company, but they never play out. If you shared every single one of those near death experiences, everybody be freaked out. Right. So you are actually the buffer of that. Like, that's what happens. The emotional roller coaster is like wild. And you as a CEO are the buffer of that to everybody around it, to your investors, to your customers, to your employees. So you're absorbing it. And I think that
Mm.
was always like the hardest part for me, which is like I was absorbing this like wild roller coaster and trying to be like, zen and calm and like keep the mission straight. And it was the right thing to do, because if I had shared every single time I thought the company was going to go under from day one, we would have never achieved what we achieved.
When I was really early, like 25 years old, really early in my career, I remember we had some terrible stuff happen at this company, and I was running, and I remember I was in my office. There was like a whole glass wall. Everyone could see in it. And I was like my head in my hands, and someone came in my office and they're like, is everything okay? I'm like, I mean, it's been one of those days or whatever. And they said, well, just so you know, everyone can see you. And now everyone thinks like the company's shutting down, or, everyone just assumes the worst. And it was that moment, I remember it like today, it clicked for me. I'm like, wow, even if it's a personal thing,
Yeah,
even if it has nothing to do with work, it actually doesn't matter. If I am showing any emotion, people are going to mirror that emotion and they're going to read into that emotion. And I think that's when you're saying what you're saying. It's like one thing to absorb it, it's another thing to absorb it and be the buffer from everyone else. And that is exhausting.
yeah, absolutely. I joke around. I mean, I loved my role and I loved being a CEO, and like I think it's one of the most like, you know, it's one of the greatest jobs, but I don't know why I like it kind of thing. Like, and like, and I joke around, I tell people, I was like, the only people who want to be CEOs are the ones who've never been CEOs before. And because then you learn your lesson. But no, it's this weird kind of like, that was the hardest thing and like such a hardcore job. And like, it was so crazy intense for a bunch of reasons. And I want to do it again, which is
Yeah.
a little crazy, I think.
Well, let's actually talk about this. So if we go to your background, have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur? Always wanted to be a CEO? Like, is that in your DNA? Did something happen early on that drove you to that?
Yeah. I don't know. I think like if I go back to like, kind of DNA, like my family has been like entrepreneurs, maybe not in the more traditional sense. Like, I come from Jewish immigrants, who like rebuilt, like fled, for Germany and Hungary and Bulgaria and rebuilt their lives. And I grew up in Uruguay. So they rebuilt their lives in Uruguay, and they were, had clothing stores and like, electrician businesses and stuff like that. My parents came to the US to go to college, and then they ended up starting a company together. I mean, not really like, so they brought McDonald's to Uruguay, like as a joint venture. My dad and my mom put all their savings. My dad worked for McDonald's
What?
Corporation, and they put all their savings into this bet of like, we're gonna go take this like thing, which is like fast food hamburgers that just didn't exist in the country. And we're going to go build this in Uruguay. And they did it successfully. And they like grew it to be one of the largest employers in the entire country. So from that perspective, I did see what like
Oh,
entrepreneurism
shit.
like look like,
Wait.
right?
They came to the US for college
Yeah, they did their MBAs, and then they worked here for a while, and then they moved back to Uruguay with us, me and my
to
sister,
start.
to start, yeah, McDonald's in Uruguay.
And do they still run that? Do they still
No, my dad is like, well, my mom's happily retired. My dad is figuring out what retired looks like still. He's like, no, like this is like 20 years ago. I think that, they left that business. My mom's done other stuff in marketing since. Now is happily retired, taking care of her brand new grandson. And my dad still does kind of like consulting for entrepreneurs and kind of, boards and stuff like that. He's still kind of like working, knows their operations really well. But yeah, they're on the kind of like on the chill in Miami style.
so you grew up around that, and do you think that did you just want to be them one day? Like, is that
I think the one thing that I appreciate most, so they worked, my parents worked like 20-hour days the entire time I was growing up. Like that's the only thing I saw, right? Like it was just very insane. Like I had grandparents and stuff like that, but like, around, but like it was really crazy, like the amount of hours they worked to, run like an organization, that big and kind of and stuff like that. I think I appreciated building, right? Building something from nothing, right? And I thought that that was always a really cool thing. And I always loved tech, and I knew I wanted to start something. I never thought about being CEO. I just knew I wanted to start something, right?
mm,
And one of the things that I thought was like particularly cool, and which is takes a lot of inspiration, I think, on the values that I kind of like around alignment and stuff like that was, you know, 20 years later, after like my dad's been done with this, we could be walking around like Uruguay, and he'd get stopped on the street by somebody who like worked for him and be like, you gave me a chance. I grew from, I had just a high school diploma, and then I could work here. And now I got this job in the management and blah, blah. And like, that was because like your company existed, And like, I had that opportunity. And I thought that was like, that's what winning looks like, in my opinion. Right. Like I looked at that and I was like, okay, that's what winning looks like. If I can get an effect of people coming years later, right, and saying, this opportunity that you gave me changed the trajectory of my career, like, what, like, that's it, right? Like that to me was
Mm,
winning, right? And that's kind
mm,
of where I go back to that alignment thing. You know, it's kind of like full circle. Like, I think I learned that from them, and they cared a lot about that. And like, I think that's like, if you really think about building stuff that's going to have, real, kind of like, kind of like, I don't know, it's like legacy. Legacy sounds kind of like a little pompous, but like, real meaning, right? Is like, you can
mhm,
create these
mhm,
things as entrepreneurs. There's this beautiful thing where you can create these organizations, these companies that, build cool shit, provide amazing experiences, to people working there, and that actually changes lives from, again, from a career perspective. I'm not saying it's like, you're going out there and, there's a plenty of things that change lives, but like, this is something I could do. And so that
mm.
was kind of like where a lot of the inspiration. So I think it's more around that. Like, I love building high performing teams, and like, kind of like, these opportunities where people can grow. And like, I love that.
What what are you doing now? I mean, I said in the intro, you're definitely very busy. You're one of the busier people probably, who's not a CEO. What are you doing? What are you planning on doing?
Yeah. Well, so, I love everything that has to do with like AI and data. I've been working in that, for 25 years. And like, I joke around, it's like, we're at the Super Bowl, right? Moment of AI right now. And like, I actually think like, we're like, maybe it's like, I don't like baseball as much. Sorry to offend anybody, but like, maybe it's like first game of the World Series is a better thing. Cause I think we're in the first inning of like AI, but we're like at the, kind of like the most critical moment that we've ever seen. It's kind of like, for some of us who've been in the space for a very long time, this is the best time ever, like, to be alive, right?
Mm,
And to be in this industry, right? Like, I mean, like, look at everything every day. It's like, oh my God, something new. And so, I've focused on being involved in that. Part of it has been as a, part-time venture partner at, Workbench, where we met, part-time at, Innovation Endeavors, which is, a different one that focused on that. And a lot of working with different CEOs. So I've been an advisor or a board member, as an independent board member in a number of AI companies. And what I get, I just get a lot of enjoyment out of helping people build their thing,
mm,
and kind of helping out. And, I joke around, I say, I can't tell you what the future looks like. I don't know. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what's not working. And so I can focus a lot of time on that. So I've been working with a bunch of different entrepreneurs. I've been lucky enough that like, they've let me into their companies, they've let me participate in their journeys. And so a bunch of my focus has been on helping others build their thing, now, while staying at the like absolute, kind of tip of the spear in terms of like
mhm.
AI.
Cool. What knowing everything you know today and all the experiences you've had, what is one piece of advice you would go back and give yourself at the very beginning of your career?
Very beginning of my career. Let's see, at the very beginning of my career. So I think like, um, nothing's as fatal as it seems. Like, I think I stressed a lot, and I gave myself a lot of anxiety because I didn't
Mhm,
understand like what, you know, how to think through consequences and like what it could be. And so, I went through this exercise halfway through, my time at Algorithmia when I was CEO, like, where, it was kind of like a CEO exercise of being like, what's the one thing you're doing today that has the biggest effect on on the company 3 years from now? And it was interesting because when I took that perspective and I kind of zoom out, right? A lot of shit just goes away. Like, there's a lot of this, like, your list of problems. Suddenly you're like, what's going to have an effect on the company 3 years from now? And it's like, you can cross 92% of it out, and you end up with that one thing that's important. And so that's probably one of the
mhm,
things, that I would, do and tell myself. That's kind of on the negative side. On the positive reinforcement, and this is something I actually like learned from my dad, was take every single opportunity and think of it as what skill set you're going to learn in this next opportunity. Like, what is the skill set acquisition that you're putting yourself through that this is going to, so any job, any career move, any, entrepreneurial thing that you go follow, like, what is it for you personally? Like, what skill set are you going to learn? And how's that skill set going to make you better 2 years from now? Right. That's actually the
Mhm.
other interview question that kind of like goes
Yeah,
back to that
yeah.
comes from there, which is like, why is this going to be a step function for you? What are you learning? What's the skill set? And do you want that skill set? And if you want a skill set that you don't have, go find the thing that's going to put you in the position to go learn that skill set. So I did
Mm.
do that. I feel like every single career move I ever did throughout my life, I did follow that, and I would kind of go back and reinforce it, and say like,
Mm.
"This is probably the best decision you made." That and don't worry as much about things. So that's
I
kind of
like that.
the two.
I think, the don't worry is an interesting one because I feel that's been a pretty common theme with a number of multi-time kind of entrepreneurs or operators or whatever of the highs are not as high as you think they are. The lows are not as low as you think that they are. And it goes back to what you said about that the journey and going through it. And it takes a long time to learn what you just said. I wish I had that advice. I truly wish I had, but even if you had the advice, it's like until you live it, you still think, that this thing is going to kill you and this thing is going to be the biggest deal you've ever done. And I think that is such, if there's one thing, especially because people go through that motion, like just to know, like, yeah, you think that's the biggest deal ever? You think it's gonna close tomorrow? It probably won't, and it'll probably be a quarter of the price that you think it's gonna be. And this thing that you think is gonna kill you, probably it's gonna either go away or you'll figure out a way to deal with it that's not as, so I like that a lot. If people want to get in touch with you, if they wanna get your advice on their company, like, what is the best way to reach you?
Email, I'm diego.oppenheimer@gmail.com. Real easy. LinkedIn, just hit me up on LinkedIn. Mention that you heard the podcast because I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, so I'll filter through that. I promise I'll respond. Yeah, on that. But yeah, I mean, if you're working on something interesting in AI and data, and or want to just chat, I'm always happy to meet with entrepreneurs all the time. I love that.
Great. Diego, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I think in this episode specifically, I think we got pretty actionable and tactile, which I like, and you gave people things they can actually go and do. So thank you for sharing and for giving back.
Thanks for having me. I love doing these with you. So, I'm looking forward to working on something together over at Workbench.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those listening, I hope you enjoyed. Please share this with your networks, like, subscribe, all of that. And we'll see you on the next episode of Not Another CEO podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.